Hi, everybody. Welcome to Small Steps, Big Life. My name is Nathan Aswell, and I'm based in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And I am just thrilled to bits today because I have a good friend of mine, a fantastic Chapman stick player who's based in Charlottesville, Virginia, named Greg Howard, who's going to talk about his journey on the stick. Hey, Greg.
Hey, Nathan. Great to see you.
It's great to see you too. And you know what? I was thinking today, I don't know if you remember this. This is probably going to blow your mind. It's blowing my mind. The first stick seminar we did together was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that does blow my mind a little
Yeah.
bit. Absolutely.
May 96.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. And that was not just the beginning of our,
No.
connection, but a lot of other people's too. There are some people who have been a big part of my musical life who came to be there as well. So that was a great event. It was a small event, but it had a big ripple effect in my life. Absolutely.
Yeah, mine too. Okay, so let's assume that people that are watching this have no idea what a Chapman stick is. We'll get to the seminars and everything else, but there it is in your hand. Greg, what the heck is that thing? Tell me all about that. Assume I know nothing.
Okay, so I'll assume you know nothing, but I'll assume that you understand maybe a little bit about, like, there are musical instruments in the world, and one of them is called the guitar. And that instrument has like this huge cultural excursion that it's on. And one of the people who really latched on to that instrument in a very passionate but a very unique way is a man named Emmett Chapman. And he was a guitarist who was studying jazz and singing and playing, and he wanted more. He wanted the guitar to do more. And so he started adding strings to it and making it bigger, and he attached a gear shift lever to it so he could make the strings go wild, and all of these things. And he was a huge fan of Jimi Hendrix and John McLaughlin and John Coltrane, people who were real musical seekers.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted something, he really wanted more out of the guitar. And one day in August of 1969, a time when there was huge transformation going on culturally in the world, he was playing his guitar, and he just started tapping on the strings with his left hand and realized, I could do that same thing with my right hand. So he started to tap on the strings with his right hand. And then he realized, well, if I turn the instrument up like this, now both my hands are like the same in relation to the strings. They're equal partners. And this whole new way of playing music was born, which he called free hands, which I love the name free hands. To me, it's extremely evocative of the feeling of playing the stick. Mm-hmm. So his hands weren't tied together. Guitar players, the left hand's got to go like this, the right hand's got to go like this. They have to work together.
Yeah.
And with the stick, they really can do their own thing, and it's so fun to play.
Yeah.
So that's in essence. You get to see the whole thing here. I'll back up so you can see the whole thing. But it's basically like an orchestra on a 2x4. And there's a guy named Bill T. Miller who came up with that expression. I should give props to Bill for that.
Yeah.
But it's a big long instrument with 12 strings,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said before, you play it just by touching the strings. So each hand touches the strings, very much like the way a piano works.
Right.
But it's a lot more fun than a piano. So you're like, piano players can't do that.
That's right.
It's also a whole lot easier to carry around.
Yes, indeed.
And that's what I started doing. I was a piano player and organ player and saxophone player, and I wanted more out of music. I wanted more for myself, and I was like, I needed to find something that would really speak to me. I mean, I love these instruments, but I must admit, I felt intimidated by them. Like they had this quality of real presence in the culture, and there were amazing musicians who played these instruments already, and I felt like
Sorry, Greg, you mean keyboard and saxophone?
Keyboard and saxophone, yeah.
Okay.
It would be really tough to chart my own course with these instruments, and I wanted to find something that I could get into that was really new territory. And I saw one of my favorite musicians and really the most famous stick player. Anybody who knows about the stick knows about Tony Levin. I saw him play in a concert in 1981 with this band called King Crimson, and the concert was at a theater in the Round. I was 15 years old at the time. but I was sitting behind him. So I didn't even see what he was doing. I didn't see the stick. I didn't understand anything about it. It didn't register with me at all.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I saw them again 4 years later, or 3 years later, whenever it was, 84, I think, yeah, that I actually saw, oh, that's what the stick is. And the light bulbs just started going off because he was playing the stick with his left hand and keyboard with his right hand. And I thought, I want to do that. That's a sound that I've been looking for. I love that sound. I want to play that instrument. So I went to a music store that I've been going to for years, always, wanting, what's the latest toy? And back then, of course, before computers, before any of that, and really before synthesizers were even very capable, instruments were really strong icons. Every instrument was like an icon in and of itself. A Stratocaster was a guitar icon. A Les Paul, the keyboard icons were the Fender Rhodes and the Mini Moog, and one of them was called the clavinet. So I know you know about the clavinet. A lot of people don't even know what a clavinet is, but you listen to a lot of Stevie Wonder songs like Superstition, stuff like that. That kind of that kind of sound, that's the clavinet.
Right.
And the clavinet works the same way the stick works, basically. You hit a key, and the key frets I guess it's something like a metal rod inside or something like that. And when you let go of the key, it stops. And so this salesman at the store, he says, well, if you like the stick, you should just buy a clavinet, because he wanted to get rid of the clavinets. And of course, if I bought the clavinet back then, it'd be worth a fortune now, because you can't get a good clavinet. But I said, no, I really want to check out the stick. I saw this instrument. I really want to play it. And he went down to the basement. They had a used stick sitting in the basement. He brought it up. And he said, here, try it. And so I took it out. Hey, he said, here's the book. Nobody here knows anything about this thing. Knock yourself out, kid. I was like 20 years old. So I spent, a good hour or two just messing around with it, and immediately said, this is it. This is the thing I want. I didn't even know that you could do like stuff with the melody, the right hand. I thought it was like a bass instrument. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I gave him all the money I had, which still wasn't enough to buy it, because I was a poor college student at the time. And I went to the bank and got a credit card and went back to the store and paid off the rest of the instrument. And at that moment began my lifelong relationship with the Chapman stick and consumer credit.
Well, I'm delighted.
Great tools in my life, and they have their pitfalls, but I love them both. I gotta
Okay, so you find the instrument of your dreams and you're off and running. Now, I went through a very similar process, but I haven't been at it as long as you. But back in 80, it was 83, right? 83, 84 when this began. Now, at that time, this is all pre-internet. What did you do? Was the book that you got with Stick Free Hands enough?
The book I got was Free Hands. That's the book that came with it. And, at that time, Emmett and Utah Chapman, who run their company, Stick Enterprises, they were, and they still are, but back then they used to send letters to people, all the time. So if you wrote them a letter and you told them you got a stick, and they would be just like, oh, that's so cool, tell us about yourself. And they were really interested in the people who were learning how to play the instrument. It's always been a very personal thing with Emmett, how to have these connections with the people who end up playing his instrument. Because he didn't even start out to run a business making sticks. He wanted to be like a musician. That was his thing. But then he'd go out and he'd play with this instrument, and people would freak out and they would say, can you make me one of those? And this went on for a while. He toured with Tim Buckley. I'm sure some of your audience would know who Tim Buckley is, a famous folk singer from California. Mm-hmm. And he was touring with Tim Buckley some, and then he would go also to New York and play with some very heavy jazz cats in New York. And so a lot of people were seeing him play. And some pretty well-known jazz critics like Leonard Feather out in LA, they saw him playing in the clubs. And so a lot of people got turned on to this. They were like, can you make me one of those? And so they started this relationship with all these people. And when I got the instrument, it took me quite a long time before I actually realized, I'm going to need strings for this thing eventually. Like I worked in a music store and I could get some of the strings, but I couldn't get all the strings because they were different lengths and stuff. Yeah. So finally I wrote to them and I was like, here I am. I'm playing this instrument. Oh, and here's this tape I made. was the first tape I ever made in '87 called Sticks and Stones of improvised music with a musician named Tim Reynolds, who's a pretty well-known guitarist these days. And I sent this tape to them, and they wrote me back this really long letter, like talking about the cassette and all the things that they were hearing in it. And, I was just a brand new player. I've been playing for like 2 years. And it was just this really thrilling connection, like, oh, these people actually really care about me and what I'm doing. So that's how I started to get connected with them. Mm-hmm. And then I met a woman who had a stick, who lived in Richmond, Virginia, which is not too far away from here. Mm-hmm. And she and I actually formed a band together and played together for a while. She played bass and stick, and I played stick and sax and keys, and we would alternate. We never played stick at the same time. We would always like trade off. So I think just because we felt like it would just be too much to have two sticks going on.
Right.
And then eventually, finally, the internet does come along. Mm-hmm. And I started to make connections via email and listservs and things like that with other people who played.
Yeah.
And that was a real thrill to like, okay, I'm not off in the hinterlands by myself with this thing. There are actually people out there who I can connect with. And by that point, I was already making records and starting to do some touring and things. So that was a pretty heady time for this all to develop. It's like, oh, I can call somebody or send an email to somebody out in LA and make a connection with them. And then they can say, yeah, why don't you come out? We'll do a seminar. We'll do a class. You can come out and play and teach a little bit. I hadn't even made my first book yet by that point. Mm-hmm. And it was like, how cool is that? I can actually go and meet people I've never met before, have no reason to be connected with them, except, that we have this common instrument that we like to play.
Yeah.
And what a community of people to get connected to.
Yeah.
I mean, you yourself and the thousands really of players that I've met since I started doing this. There's over 6,000 of these instruments out there, and I'm sure I've met at least 2,000 people who play the stick on some level.
So let's just stop for a sec, Greg. So are you trying to tell me that between the time you were in that band, well, with the exception of your connection with Yuta and Emmett, and the time you were in the band with this other stick player, there were no other stick players in your life? You were doing this completely on your own, developing your sound, writing your compositions. You were just out there on your own until what, like 10 years later?
Yeah, I mean, well, I met Emmett personally. The first time I met him was in '91. I was out in California in '91. Uh-huh. And I met him then. And then really another 4 years went by before I met any other people who played the stick. And during that time, that was like really the beginning of my fruitful time with the instrument.
Yeah.
That's when I recorded stick figures. That's when I really started to develop my own identity on the instrument. And so in a way, it's a good thing, because I don't know if I would have gotten the things happening that I did if I had been so focused on this community aspect of playing. Like it was good to be insular at that time. Mm. My dad had just passed in '91, and I was still a very young man. I was only 26 years old. And it was a real kick in the pants to me to like, if you're going to learn how to play this instrument, you got to buckle down and get busy. Because he was a musician in avocation. He was a very good trumpet player, but he never pursued it as a career. He was way too tenuous of a thing. Like he was raised during the Depression, and he would never like say, "Oh, I'm going to be a musician," and he would never say the same thing to me. "Oh yeah, you should be a musician. That's a great idea." Sure.
Right.
But he loved music, and he really exposed me to a lot of music. Mm-hmm. And when he passed away, I realized I have to learn how to do this the right way.
Yeah.
And so I quit my job.
Wow.
I started living in this little cabin where I hardly had to pay any money for rent and could work off most of my rent doing like yard work for the lady who owned the cabin. And I started making that record. And I spent from, I guess, the beginning of 1992 until almost the end of 1992 making that record. I spent 500 hours of my life making that record.
Wow.
And that's how I learned to play, was to just really sequester and write and develop the tunes and just play and play and play and play and play. And that was it. It was the beginning for me of being a serious musician. And I don't think I could do it now. I don't think I could stop my life at 51 and say, oh, I'm going to learn how to do this one thing and put everything else aside and just do this one thing. I mean, how many people who have families and things like that can do that? So it was good timing is what I'm trying to say. It was like the time was right for me to dig in and learn how to do that.
Okay, Greg. We got to give people a taste of your playing, man. Well, give us a little bit of something. I'll leave it completely up to you. Give us a couple of minutes of
something mellow, because I haven't had too much time to warm up. So this is my latest composition. This is a piece called "Finding Home," and I'm not gonna play the whole thing. I'll just play like the basic theme, but it'll give people an idea of how the instrument sounds. And I just feel like it's a nice thing to start playing after that little roundabout explanation of how I got into this stick.
So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you joining us late, this is Greg Howard, master Chapman stick player from Charlottesville, Virginia, playing one of his latest compositions. Go, brother.
That's all I'm going to play because I don't want to hang out on it too long. I just wanted to give people a sense of the tune and how it sounds.
That's great. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Yeah, I like that tune. I think is nice because it actually has this kind of. It almost sounds like somebody's playing the guitar, just kind of chilling out in there, by the fireplace. And
so would it be true to say I'm noticing something, and I'm just wondering if you would agree with me when I say this? When I first heard you play, not stick figures, but certainly in the CDs that you've made since you've done stick figures, I've heard a lot of passion and fire and complicated and fast and I'm just, I don't know. It seems to me like all the videos I've seen you make in the last year, I'll say off the top of my head, there's a mellowness to you now that I'm seeing come out.
Well, okay, there's a couple of reasons for that. Okay, one of them is about a year ago I fell and landed on my left wrist really funny and hurt it quite badly, and I couldn't really play. Like the positioning of the left hand was like the worst possible positioning for it. And after I did that, I was furiously working on trying to develop that Bach cello suite prelude, the first cello suite prelude by Johann Sebastian Bach. And I didn't stop when I hurt my hand. I kept on going. And through the process of recording that piece, making the video for that, I really, really did myself a major disservice. And so it's taken a while for me to even get to the point where I can play with any kind of fury in my left hand at this point. So that's one thing. But I think the other side of it is that I definitely feel a little bit more introspective these days, and I think that I'm trying to get to something really essential with this stick, something that's really basic and elemental, and that isn't really about playing the stick so much as it is just finding music for its own sake. And I think it's taken me a long time to get to that place with the instrument, because you're right, a lot of my music tends to be kind of pyrotechnical, for lack of a better term. It's like, how much can I do, and how far out can I stretch the boundaries of music with this instrument? So it, in a lot of ways, has been about the instrument. And so, maybe I'm taking a little bit more of a turn. It's more of about like music in general, pure music, for lack of a better way to look at it. But I'm not saying that those are necessarily mutually exclusive things. I'm just saying that they're kind of different perspectives on the same thing.
Right.
And in that way, that's a nice place to be. That you can look at things in different ways.
Right.
And still be the same person, still be the same artist. But yeah, you're right. And every one of my records has really been a completely different vector with the stick as well, which I enjoy. I don't want to do the same thing over and over again. I would hate to be the artist who does the same record over and over and over again. That to me is the most boring thing that anybody can possibly do as an artist.
So I think you've answered the next question, which I'd like to ask, which is, what is it that keeps you going with this? And it sounds to me like it just continues to be new. It just continues to take you into new areas, new avenues, both inside of you and outside of you.
Yeah, well, it's true that is definitely the case. But I think that what else keeps me going with it is that it is okay, I'm a gardener, for example. I love to garden. Mm-hmm. And every year when you go into the garden, a lot of what you do is the same as what you did before, right? But every year you go into the garden, it's an opportunity to try new things. Like, I want to plant different kinds of vegetables this year just to see if I can do it, see how they can grow. So I'll grow some of the things that I grow every year, mm-hmm. and then I'll grow some new things every year. And there are certain things that I grow that nobody else seems to want to grow, and I'm just like, you people are nuts. These are amazing. And that's kind of like, some of the music I like to play. It's, no one else wants to play this music but me, so I got to play it and give it to people so that they can experience it. Mm-hmm. So that's a nice metaphor, I think, for it. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I like to do is cook. And I don't cook very many things. I cook kind of the same things over and over again. And every time I cook and eat those same things and share those same things with people, especially new people, mm-hmm. I feel in a lot of ways like I do when I sit down to play an old song on the stick that I haven't maybe played in a while. And it just brings me back to this place of understanding and connectedness with the instrument that is really like, yeah, this is me. This thing is as much a part of me as anything could be, and that's why I keep coming back to it. If I leave it behind, it would just be like leaving a huge part of myself behind. So I think it's like status quo and then some, I guess, would be the way to look at it.
Yeah, beautifully said. And you speaking about the injury to your hand is one thing, but the last question I'd like to ask is, being grateful for the entire process. Like, there are obviously, like anything else, like any other aspect of our lives, there are going to be points where things happen that are setbacks that can look like things that will make us step to the side or back or whatever. And so hearing what the hand injury did to your whole perception, the purifying of your sound, was a very important thing, which I would assume would not have happened if you hadn't injured your hand. Are there other things like that?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, I had to keep things simple in order to actually play the instrument. There was just no other way around it. Yeah. And as a result, I really had to kind of rethink things for a while. And so, yeah, maybe it was like suddenly I had to reimagine what it meant to be a stick player. Not that I would never have expected to heal, but there's always this thing in your head like, wow, is this always going to feel like this when I play? Mm-hmm. Is that something that's going to be something I have to live with? Right. And people have that kind of stuff happen to them all the time. People get injured, they get sick. Yeah. All these things happen, and yet you have to find a way to keep doing what it is you're doing, regardless of what those things are. Yeah. And maybe you do get things out of it. I mean, I know a guitar player, I won't mention his name because I don't know if I'm going to tell the story exactly correctly and I don't want to misrepresent it, but he had a brain tumor and he had to relearn how to make music. Mm. And my perception of his music after he had the brain tumor was that it was way more interesting than the music he was making before he had the brain tumor. But would he trade his brain tumor for his art? I don't think so. I mean, I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't say, oh, it was a good thing to have a brain tumor,
Right.
because that changed my music, So I think that that's something that we all kind of have to understand. Those are physical manifestations of things. But of course, people have emotional manifestations of things like that too. Your relationships with people end, that changes your perspective. I have 2 kids that I adopted many years ago. That changes your perspective. All the things that can happen to you in your life change your perspective. And specifically, the people that you meet and start to make music with really change your perspective.
Right.
I mean, there is nothing more earth-shaking to a musician than to meet someone that you can play with, because that's like this real shift. It becomes a whole other way of looking at what it is that you do. So there have been a few people in my life like that, that just encounters that have completely reshaped the way that I think about making music myself. And I'm so grateful, to them for being open to me and what I do. I just can't say it enough. It's just been amazing.
So tell us about some of those people.
Well, the main person has to be John Dirth, who is a trumpet player, jazz musician, and educator who lives here in Charlottesville. And I met John really very early on in my stick journey. He was teaching at a music store here in Charlottesville, and I was in there trying out the effects pedals with my stick. And he interrupted his trumpet lesson, and he came out and he said, I just had to come out and hear who was making that sound. And it turned out that he had actually jammed with Emmett Chapman in New York several years before that. John Abercrombie had brought Emmett to a jam session that John was at, so he knew about the stick. And this was like this beginning of a musical collaboration. We just played a gig together on Saturday night. So we've been playing music together now since, it's got to be 30 years almost that we've been playing music together. And, it's just this thing where we're like an old couple in a way, like we can even get cranky with each other when we're playing, like, oh man, you're always doing that, you're just like, why don't you do something else for a change? It's so fun. But I wouldn't trade the connection for anything.
Right.
So he was huge in that way. And then I've had a couple of other musicians that I worked with over the years who passed now. A really great drummer named Johnny Gilmore that I played with a lot back in the 80s and 90s. He's on a record of mine called Shapes, which I know you know that record. Fabulous drummer, completely spontaneous and explosive, and yet he had this side of him that was deeply sentimental. And like he would say, let's play Where Are You Tonight? Let's play Softly She Walks. These are all my ballads. He always wanted to play the ballads and just like make them as sensitive and then suddenly bombastic as he possibly could. And I was like, Johnny, you're like this monster funk jazz drummer. Why do you want to play these ballads all the time? But I love to play the tunes, so I would never guess it like that. So there are people like that, but I do live in a small town, and there aren't that many people here that you can really make connections with. So it's pretty special when you make connections with people in a small place like this. Another person I recently had a great experience with, and I hope to reconnect with at some point, was this Tibetan singer named Rigzen Dolma. And we just played a couple of tunes together, did a couple of concerts together, but she was very open to me playing stuff. I mean, she's like this huge pop star in Tibet. She's like, a Mariah Carey of Tibet, if you want to put her in. But she was just here, and we played, and it was just a great connection. There's a video of she and I playing together on my website and on YouTube, and it was just such a great experience to play with somebody who didn't speak any English at all, and yet we could come up with this way of understanding the tunes that she had and put them together and play. It was fabulous.
Cool. Let's tell people about the seminars.
Yeah.
So that's been about 20 years, right?
Yeah, and look at this wall behind me. Okay, so you can see, if you see the black picture on the right there. Yeah. That one right there. That stick night is from the first seminar I did in Holland. So seminars have brought me to countries all over the world, just people saying, hey, you want to come and teach? And I'm like, yes, I want to come and teach. So the picture over there on the to the right of it, or I guess to your left of it there, that's all the people who came to this seminar in Europe, 1999. People from Denmark, England, Ireland, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Norway, Switzerland, just everywhere. All these people came, and it was just like such an amazing thing to have all these people get together, because again, back then the internet was still pretty young.
Yeah.
People had sticks. They wanted to get together. They wanted to connect. They wanted to hook up, but they didn't really have that many ways to make that happen. So, I met you in '96 in Fullerton, California. How you ended up there, is a mystery to me in a way. It's like, how did you end up going to this thing anyway?
Well, like you, there wasn't anybody in Vancouver that I knew of that was playing. And I became aware of what was going on in terms of seminars. I read Tony's interview. Tony Levin did an interview in Bass Player magazine talking about listservs. And I can't remember the name of the one that was happening then around 95, 96. Stickwire, exactly. So he mentioned seminars in Stickwire. I ended up getting my second Chapman stick in March of '96. I drove down to Seattle and got it, and then heard about this seminar being offered in Fullerton. And so I said, gotta go. So like everyone else, that was the nearest point for me. And then, as I well remember, I was down there and I said, you said, we've got to, if you want to do this in Vancouver, I'd be happy to come. And so you did, and we were off and running, and we've been friends ever since. So,
yeah, that's one of the aspects of this that always amazes me when I look back. It doesn't amaze me that I'm your friend. That's not what I meant. What amazes me is how powerfully people can become connected to your life just by making yourself open to trying something new. Just venturing out there in the world. And in a way, it's not really about you. It's about what can happen. Like, I just want to go see what this is about. I just want to be a participant. And it's a totally different idea than being like a tourist, for example, where you go and you experience some place that is a foreign place to you, and you have your photo book out of it and your memories and whatever. It's like, no, it's a way to make yourself open to connections with other people. And those connections, they can resonate or they cannot. But the ones that do resonate to me are, I think, really remarkable. And I think that if people were just a little bit more open in general as they go out in their daily lives, they would be able to make many more connections like this. And my friend John Durth, I told you the story about he's in his daily zone. He just said, I got to go check this out. He's somebody who knows how to do this, who can make connections with people right off the bat. And I've been learning more how to do that, as I get older, and less self-absorbed.
Sweet. How many seminars do you think you've been a part of at this point? Just estimate.
At least 60, I would say.
So that's what, kind of 3 or 4 a year-ish?
Yeah, it varies. When we adopted the kids, I didn't do any traveling for a whole year. I took a whole year off from any traveling and stayed home, which was a really strange experience for me as somebody who was on the road a lot prior to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, 3 or 4 or 5, I guess if I've been doing them 20 years, that would average around 3 a year or so.
Yeah.
But I've been to Italy a bunch of times, and France a bunch of times, a couple of times in England, Germany, Japan, Canada, the U.S. A lot of places I'd like to go. I just haven't managed to get myself there yet. But
am I right in assuming that most interest in the stick in North America anyway tends to be on the coasts? That you haven't done a lot kind of in the center of the...
No, I don't think that's true at all. I've done a lot of seminars in Michigan, for example. That's kind of a center of the stick universe. There's a music store in Ann Arbor called Oz's Music, run by a guy named Steve Osborne, who's been selling sticks for decades.
Wow.
And he and Glenn Foreman have created a real serious scene there in Michigan. I did a lot of events in Texas back when I was touring a lot. And so I found myself in Texas quite a bit doing college tours, and I was able to arrange a bunch of things there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done seminars in Illinois and, Pittsburgh. Dave Brodsky is in Pittsburgh. He does a lot of events there. But yeah, more so on the coast, just because California is kind of where the stick started, of course.
Right.
And then there's a lot more people on the East Coast. There's a couple of music stores that have sold sticks over the years. Sam Ash in New York sold a lot of sticks. So there are a lot of people in the Northeast who had them.
Right.
But yeah, gosh, I mean, it's really, I want to do more. I mean, I want to go down south and do something down in Florida. I was supposed to do one in Florida once, and there was a hurricane. Just like, okay, well, that's not going to happen. Right. Let's try to set it up again. I'd love to go to Mexico and do something there. There's a great stick scene in Mexico right now.
Wow.
Mauricio Sotelo, who I don't know if you met Mauricio. He came to the seminar we did on the first one we did on Gabriola Island.
Okay.
He came to Mexico with one of his musical partners, a guy named Hugo Santos. They came up from Mexico, and I met them there. Mauricio is a fabulous musician, and he's been organizing stuff in Mexico. So, and there's seminars happening all over that I haven't been a part of, but Australia has events periodically. They just had a huge one in Spain back in September that Guillermo Cides organized together with Gene Perry, who's a guy, you met Gene, of course.
Yeah.
He has the Free Hands Academy out in LA. So and Interlochen in Michigan, which is one that Glenn Porman has been organized. It's a really great event up at the Interlochen College of Creative Arts, which is this like total music mecca out it's in the northern part of the lower peninsula of Michigan. Beautiful, beautiful setting. So, and I'd like to do one here. It's been a long time since I did one in Charlottesville, but I'd like to do another one here.
Yeah. Greg, we got to hear you play somewhere. Please give us a little taste of something else. Whatever. Let me give people a taste of something that's a little bit more along the raucous lines of what you were talking about earlier. Let's see if I can get my hands to move right. So with the stick, you've got this ability to play two parts at one time. And a friend of my parents, when she found out I was playing this instrument, she was like, "Hey, you got to check out this record by this friend of mine from when I was living back in Germany back in the '60s. This guy named Eric Firstel, who was a sound-on-sound composer. So he would play one guitar part and then add another guitar part on it. This was back when it was still a relatively new thing. And he had this piece called Guitaresque, which I just love because the left hand is playing in one time signature and the right hand is playing in another time signature. So it's fun to see the way they overlap and the way they sound. So I don't have all my sound effects hooked up, so I'll just have to play it really good so that what it sounds like. So here's Guitaresque, and this is from a CD of mine called Soul. Thank you, sir. Greg Howard, ladies and gentlemen. Master Chapman Stickler, based in Charlottesville, Virginia, playing a little bit of Guitar-esque.
Wow, my pleasure, Nathan. Thank you.
Well, you know, pal, looks to me like your fingers are just fine.
Oh, yeah. No worries. No worries. In fact, when I fell, it was on my mother-in-law's driveway. And this year when the snow and ice came, I said, forget it. I'm not shoveling your driveway. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Got to get somebody else.
Yeah. Good call. So, what's coming, man? What's next?
I've got some really cool things going on. Right now, I'm writing music for a theater production of To Kill a Mockingbird, which I will be performing live with the performance of the play.
Wow.
And just me playing the stick. It's a local theater company that's been around for a long time. And actually, I did music for their very first theater production, which was back in 1990, of a production of No Exit. And so I'm doing all the music, writing all the music, and also kind of improvising and playing sound effects, you know, on the stick, you know, for things that happen in the show. It's really fun, and I'm glad to do it. Super glad to do it. You know, they asked me to do it, and I was like, yeah, I haven't done anything like that in a really long time, and so I'm into it. It's a great play. It's such a great story, you know. When I think about like the power of creativity, I think about, you know, Harper Lee. She basically did this one huge thing, and then didn't after that. She was just like, okay, I'm not gonna do any more books. I'm just gonna, that's my thing. That's what I did, and. So, you know, your output as a creative person isn't really what's important. What's important is really hitting that one thing that really works. And when you can do that and make a real impression like that, you know, that's everything, I think. Yeah. So when I look at Emmett and what he's done with the stick, you know, he keeps working on it, making it better and better and better and better. But, the first thing he did was like the most important thing. All the other stuff has been great to have, but if he hadn't done that first thing, then, where would I be? I'd probably be playing like, in an ABBA cover band or something.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Somehow I don't think so.
I don't. Yeah, I'd be like trying to imitate Rick Wakeman or something.
So still staying in keeping with your with what you said about your family and about doing this show. So another year of staying closer to home then. Well, and you can teach via Skype, which is wonderful. You can.
I teach. Yeah, I teach students all over the world through Skype. I have students in Argentina, Australia, all over Europe, North America, and I've had students in, I think, 13 different time zones so far, which is pretty cool. If I can wrap the globe, I think there's a couple time zones where there like really isn't anybody. So, I'll have to send an instrument to some country and just say here, just so I can like get that time zone. Some guy in Yakutsk, Okay.
Right. So on that note, the websites which I wanted to include at the bottom of the replay are your site, greghoward.com, and Emmett's site, of course, stick.com. Are there other sites that people need to be aware of that you'd like them to be aware of?
Well, they can get to my YouTube site and Facebook site and stuff like that through my own page.
Right.
And they'll be able to find out about seminars and things, through the stick.com website if they're interested.
And if people want to take lessons with you, you have information about that on your site as well?
Absolutely. And another thing is if they're, I also teach through the University of Virginia, which is right here in Charlottesville. So if you want to study the stick for academic credit, you can do that at UVA, one of the few places in the world where that's a possibility.
Fantastic.
And, just watch the music, soak it up, enjoy it. And if the stick speaks to you, don't wait to get into it, because I know people, I have students now, a lot of my students are, in their 40s and their 50s, and maybe they got a stick 20 or 30 years ago, and they're glad to be getting into it now. And some of them are becoming truly amazing musicians, even starting, at a later point in their life. But if you can do it when you're young, when all those synapses are still up there, it's a lot easier, so get into it.
Great.
Absolutely.
Cool. Is there anything that I didn't ask you? Is there anything that you wanted to say that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
Oh gosh, I'm getting big into doing transcriptions of more established repertoire. Like I'm doing a lot of transcriptions of Bach pieces now for the stick. Mm-hmm. And I like to play jazz standards. I like to cover rock tunes. I think that the stick is it's a true tabula rasa. So, whatever your angle on music is, you can pursue it through the instrument. But my absolute favorite thing to do still is just to improvise. I mean, there's something about the connectedness of having your fingers right on these strings, and yet also being able to have a conversation between your two hands. Yeah. It's really spectacular, and no other instrument feels like that. The piano is awesome, but the piano is still a machine. There's still this thing between you and where the sound comes out, and to be able to have that kind of relationship and communication internally as a musician it's just fabulous. Yeah. So
I've said to people often when and you know this very well too, because this is your experience, because there are so, relatively speaking, few of us playing these instruments compared to guitars, whatever. I often, I say a few things, and the last thing I say is it's piano technique on a stringed instrument, and they say, have you ever wanted to be a piano player? And I say, yeah, many times. And in the end, I realized that this never felt something natural, comfortable to me. I'm used to not only playing string instruments, but the idea of holding something close to me and putting my arms around it and just so you're embracing it. It's just this much more intimate connection.
Absolutely. And our friend Jim Riley, who just published a great biography of Emmett Chapman called Stickman, really talks about that very well is that you look at these hands here, and they're really connected to the whole instrument is really connected to you. It's really a part of you. And even an instrument like the guitar, where you're kind of holding one hand out away from you, you can feel it, it's there. But with the stick, even though it's an electric instrument, it feels very natural. It doesn't feel like an electric instrument. It feels like, because you can feel those fingers vibrating, the strings vibrating under your fingers. You can feel the structure vibrating, even though it's very subtle. It's still really there, and it gives you what you put into it. It gives it back to you in really wonderful and surprising ways.
Beautiful. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
I'm
Thanks
happy
so much for having me. And
I'm delighted. I'm just delighted, and I have no doubt that people will watch this, and we're going to turn on a whole bunch of new people to the instrument, which I'm excited about. And
I hope so. I hope for their sake, and for mine, and for yours, and for posterity's sake. Just the more people who pick this up, the more it propagates out there into the world. And look around. There's some unbelievable musicians playing this instrument out there.
Yeah.
And just check them out.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have been spending an hour with myself, Nathan Aswell, in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and Greg Howard, master Chapman stick player based in Charlottesville, Virginia. Greg's website is greghoward.com, GREGHOWARD. And you can find out all about Greg and where he's performing and how to study with him, etc., on his site. A bunch of YouTube videos there as well, and links to his YouTube page. And if you're interested in this magnificent instrument that the both of us are in love with, please visit stick.com, STICK.com. Learn all about Emmett Chapman and his work. There are now 8 different kinds of Chapman sticks, so I'm sure that you'll find one that most speaks to you. Thanks, Greg. So I will have this link for you up within the hour. And for those of you who are interested in seeing more of my shows, I'm now settling on Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific is the time the shows happen. Every once in a while, there'll be an exception to that just based on scheduling. The next show will be Tuesday, February 9th, when I will speak to Richard McDeesey and Sue Riley, who are the masterminds behind the Positive Music Festival, which I'm going to be a part of February 11th to 15th in Florida. So I'm sad you won't be in Florida, Greg, because it would have been nice to see you there.
Well, maybe the next time there's a Positive Music Festival, we can both be there.
Oh, yeah, baby. Well, I'll talk to you about it. It happens in February, and it looks like Tampa is where it's going to be for the foreseeable future. So
awesome. Well, it sounds like a great thing, man. Positive music. What's not to like about positive music?
Not a darn thing. And I get a chance to go and be the stick ambassador there. So
there you go. Well, tell me all about it.
Will do. All right.
All right.
Thanks, Greg. And thank you all for watching. My great pleasure, brother. Bye.